Hello everybody, my name is Sumandua. I'm a registered migration agent based in Brisbane, Australia. In this video today, I want to talk about the Tasmania's updated requirements for both visa subclasses 190 and 491. So to meet Tasmania's nomination requirements, first you have to meet the requirements that are set by the Department of Home Affairs, and on top of that you will also have to meet the requirements that are set by the Tasmania's state government. To meet the requirements of Department of Home Affairs, you need to be under 45 years of age, you need to have a minimum of competent English, you need to have a positive skills assessment in your nominated occupation, and you also need to have a minimum of 65 points including the state points. So let's first look at the 190 visa nomination from Tasmania. So it has two categories. The first one is the category for Tasmania's graduates, and the second one is for applicants who are working in Tasmania. They have updated some of the requirements for the Tasmania's graduates, which will come into effect after June 2021. So to meet the requirements under this category, the applicants need to have completed a study of a minimum of 92 weeks in Tasmania. The course needs to be completed full-time and on-site in Tasmania. Applicants need to be living in Tasmania while they are studying their course. The applicant and the applicant's dependents need to be living in Tasmania if they are in Australia. At the time of your application, if you're not working in a skilled employment, you need to also provide a career plan to the state. Your study does not need to be related to the nominated occupation. However, a relevant skills assessment will be highly regarded. So what it means is that if you are somebody who's an engineer from back home and you've got your skills assessment based on your bachelor's that you completed overseas, but then you went to Tasmania and studied a master's in IT or something like that, which is not related, it will not be highly regarded, but they will still consider it. If you're somebody who's done a bachelor's in engineering from overseas and got your skills assessment based on your bachelor's and then went to Tasmania and studied a master's of project management, in that case it will still be considered relevant and then your skills assessment will be highly regarded. If you are somebody who's studied in Tasmania on a student visa, then your study must be a diploma or a degree. If it's a Cert 3 or a Cert 4, then it needs to be in the priority sector. So if you're somebody who's studying a Cert 3 or a Cert 4 level of course, then your qualification needs to be in the priority industry training and workforce development areas, which can be nominated for the 190 visa subclass. So the industry areas are tourism and hospitality, and they also tell you what's the minimum qualification required, which is a Cert 3. And the building and construction, the minimum qualification is Cert 4, Advanced Manufacturing and Energy, Cert 4, Information and Communications Technology degree or postgraduate degree, Aged Services, Cert 3, Disability Services, Cert 3, Agriculture, Cert 4, Aquaculture, Cert 4, Transport and Logistics will be a Cert 4 as well. So if you are somebody who wants to do a Cert 3 or a Cert 4 level of course for 2 years in Tasmania to then qualify for their 190 nomination, then your qualification needs to be in one of these areas. If you are somebody who's done a qualification in Tasmania while not holding a student visa, so I think they are only referring to applicants who go to Tasmania on a 485 visa to study. So those applicants will have to study something in these priority areas. They also have a category 2 for 190 nomination, which is working in Tasmania. So under this category, you need to be working in your nominated occupation full-time, which is 35 hours a week, or it could be 2 part-time jobs as well, equivalent to 35 hours a week. You need to have a positive skills assessment in your nominated occupation, and your nominated occupation needs to be on their TSOL list, which is Tasmania's skilled occupation list. If your dependents are living in Australia, then they need to be living with you in Tasmania before you apply for their nomination. The business that you're working for in Tasmania needs to be well established and need to be running for a minimum of 12 months in Tasmania. It is also very important that your wages are equivalent to somebody who is an Australian citizen or permanent resident and hired in the same position. Tasmania also offers a 491 nomination, and they have got 5 categories for 491. So category 1 is Tasmania's graduate, category 2 is working in Tasmania. Then they have got 2 categories under category 3, which is 3A and 3B. 3A is for overseas applicants whose occupation is on the TSOL, and 3B is for overseas applicants as well who have a job offer letter in their nominated occupation. Category 4 is for applicants who have a family in Tasmania, and Category 5 is for applicants who are running a small business in Tasmania. For Category 1, which is Tasmania's graduate, you need to have completed a course in Tasmania. The course needs to be CRICOS registered for a minimum of 40 weeks. You must have completed your study full-time and on-site in Tasmania. You and your dependents need to be living in Tasmania at the time of your nomination application. If you are not currently working in a skilled employment, then you will also need to provide a career plan to the Tasmania State Nomination Team. Your study does not have to be related to your nominated occupation. However, relevant skills assessment will be highly regarded. If you're studying in Tasmania on a student visa, then the course must be a diploma or a degree. If it's a Cert 3 or a Cert 4 level of course, then it needs to be on the priority sector, just like we discussed before for 190 nomination. If you have studied in Tasmania on a visa which is not a student visa, in that case as well, you need to be studying in an area which is in the priority sector. Now let's talk about the category 2, which is working in Tasmania. So under this category, you need to be working in any skilled occupation for a minimum of 6 months in Tasmania, and the employment must be full-time, which is 35 hours a week, or it can be a combination of 2 part-time jobs. If your dependents are living in Australia, they need to be living with you in Tasmania at the time of the application. If you are working in an occupation which falls under NSCO skill level 4 or 5, then there are some extra requirements that you will need to meet. We will put those extra requirements in the description below. There are some areas of employment which are not supported by Tasmania's state nomination team. So these employments are relating to supermarkets, service stations, limited service restaurants, massage clinics, taxi, Uber driving, subcontracted cleaning, business maintenance, or security work. So if you're working in any of these occupations, then you may not be eligible for the 491 nomination. Tasmania has also opened for overseas applicants, and they have a category 3A for overseas applicants where your occupation is on the Tasmania's skilled occupation list. Please note that this category is invitation only. So what it means is that you will have to lodge your expression of interest in the skill select system, and only if Tasmania's state nomination team will invite you, only then you can go ahead and apply for their nomination. To be eligible under category 3A, you need to meet these requirements. So the first one is that your nominated occupation should be listed on the Tasmanian Skilled Occupation List, also known as TSOL. So currently there are 124 occupations on the list. You or any of your dependents have not lived in another Australian state or territory within the last 12 months. So if you're somebody who's recently moved from Australia to overseas and they were living in a different state before, then you won't be eligible under this category. You also need to have the English requirement met as specified on the TSOL. So some of the occupations require a higher English level. Also have a look, because there are some other requirements and notes as well on the occupation list, and you have to make sure that you do meet those requirements. You need to also have access to sufficient financial assets to fund your migration and settlement in Tasmania for at least 6 months while you seek employment. It is very important that you have researched the Tasmanian labour market and have been invited to seek nomination, unless your occupation is listed as high demand in the TSOL. You need to provide evidence that there are sufficient employment opportunities in Tasmania, or that you have reasonable prospects for employment related to your occupation. So they have also provided a document checklist if you are applying under this stream. Please note that if your occupation is listed as high demand and you meet the specified requirements, employability evidence is not required. So I will actually also show you how to understand these requirements on the occupation list. Now I will also explain you the application process for this category. So like I mentioned before, this is an invitation only category. So you cannot go ahead and lodge the nomination application unless and until you get invited from Tasmania's state nomination team. So you will have to read the nomination requirements for category 3A, overseas applicant TSOL, so which I just explained you before, the extra requirements that some of the occupations have. If you believe you can meet the requirements, you need to create an expression of interest in the skill select system. You also need to choose Tasmania as your state of interest. So if you choose all states in your EOI, then Tasmania may not pick up your EOI. So it's very important that you only choose Tasmania as your state, and you also choose 491 category on the EOI. Now, Migration Tasmania will periodically review EOIs and contact the most promising candidates and invite them to apply for nomination through Skill Select. So if you are invited to apply for nomination, you need to complete your application for nomination on their website within 60 days. Now, when you actually apply for the nomination, it is very important that you attach a copy of the email invitation that you received from Skill Select. So if you don't attach your invitation, you will be refused nomination. Also note that Migration Tasmania will only review EOIs that have been created or updated in the last 6 months. Now let's just look at Tasmania's skilled occupation list. So they have some notes as well at the start of their occupation list, which you can read. So we are talking about the overseas applicants category 3A. So they have put some notes that we have just discussed before. So if your occupation is in high demand and you are applying under category 3A, which is invitation only, then you do not need to provide the employability evidence if your occupation is in high demand. But if your occupation is not in their high demand occupations, then in that case you still need to provide that employability evidence. But you still have to meet the other requirements and notes where you can see category 3A only. So if you are an occupational therapist, you need the skills assessment. You also need 3 years post qualification work experience, and you also need proficient English for this occupation. So if you are a registered nurse NEC, then you do need proficient English, you need your APRA registration, and you also need 2 years post qualification work experience. But for high demand occupations, you do not need to provide the employability evidence. Now let's look at some of the other occupations. So let's look at motor mechanic. So if you're a motor mechanic, this occupation is available for category 3A. You need to have competent English, and you also need to have at least 3 years of post-qualification workforce experience for this occupation. So let's look at one more. Let's look at cafe or restaurant manager. So it is also available under category 3A. You need to have proficient English, and you also need to have 3 years of post qualification management experience in a large scale restaurant before you can actually lodge your EOI and become eligible to get invited from Tasmania. So this is for category 3A. Now let's look at the next category, which is category 3B for overseas applicants who have a job offer letter in their nominated occupation. So to meet the eligibility for this category, it's very important that you have received a formal job offer letter for a job that is based in Tasmania and that is in your nominated occupation. So if the job offer is in area relating to the TSOL, you must have a skills assessment in that area and should meet the additional English and registration experience requirements listed for that occupation on the TSOL. So I would say that even if your occupation is not on the TSOL and you have a job offer letter, you can still apply for the nomination from Tasmania. You or any of your dependents must not have lived in another Australian state or territory within the last 12 months. Your employer must have a well-established business that has been actively operating in Tasmania for the past 12 months. And your wages and conditions must be no less favorable than those that would apply to an Australian citizen or permanent resident, and a salary or wages are equivalent to the market salary rate. So they have also created a document checklist for this category, so you may want to look at that as well. We will put the link in the description. You also have to make sure that there is a genuine and ongoing need for your position within the business and the capacity for the business to sustain your employment. So I will also show you how you can actually see the requirements for category 3B on the TSOL occupation list. Now let's look at category 3B for overseas applicants. So under this category, the overseas applicants need to have a job offer letter in the area relating to TSOL, and they must have a skills assessment in that area and should meet the additional English and registration experience requirements listed for that occupation on the TSOL. So for this category, let's have a look at an occupation, maybe construction project manager. So this occupation is available for category 3B as well. So under category 3B, the construction project manager will need a proficient English, and the other requirements and notes are actually only for category 3A. So if you are applying under category 3B and you have a job offer letter, you do not need to meet these other requirements and notes because those are for category 3A only. Now let's look at category 4, which is family in Tasmania. Now the important thing to consider under this category is that you need to be in Australia and outside Tasmania to apply under this category. So if you're already living in Tasmania, you need to look at other nomination requirements. Also, this category is not available for overseas applicants. For overseas applicants, it's only category 3A and 3B. So for family in Tasmania, like I said before, you need to be living outside of Tasmania but in Australia to apply under this stream. Also, the other thing to note is that the family member needs to be an immediate family member of the primary applicant. So the applicant who has a skills assessment and applying as a primary applicant for the 491 visa nomination. So if the immediate family member is actually related to your spouse, then you won't be eligible under this category. So the family member has to be an Australian citizen or a permanent resident for at least 12 months and also have to be living in Tasmania for a minimum of 12 months before they can sponsor you. The family member can be a parent, brother, uncle, aunt, child or grandparent. Now let's look at category 5, which is available for small business owners in Tasmania. To be eligible under this category, you need to be running a business in Tasmania as a sole owner for a minimum of 6 months. You should also be able to demonstrate that you will be able to make a personal income of $53,900, which is the minimum taxable income requirement to go towards your permanent residency subclass 191 visa. You will also need to demonstrate that you understand the requirements and responsibility as an employer. You will also need to provide a business plan to Tasmania. Please note that franchise businesses or partly owned businesses will not be acceptable under this category. Also, service stations, massage clinics, or taxi or Uber related businesses will not be acceptable under this category. So if you have any questions regarding Tasmania's state nomination, please get in touch with us. To stay updated about Australia's immigration, make sure that you subscribe to our channel.